pickleball connection there, Vern Stenman. I get involved with Kennedy Little League on the board, Vern Stenman. Our speaker from 2 weeks ago, Sam, general manager of Madison Mallards, who's your boss? Vern Stenman. And what's he here to talk about? None of those things. He's here to talk about Madison Forward. So a little bit of history, president of Big Top Sports Entertainment. Worked with Mallards, Kenosha Kingfish, the Green Bay Voyagers, also assistant GM for St. Cloud River Bats before taking position with the Minnesota Wild in their inaugural season. I believe from McFarland. Lives in McFarland, 2 children, Chloe May and Bodie. Originally from St. Cloud, Minnesota. Does that make you a Viking fan?
No, I'm
We're done.
no, I'm a Packers fan. Oh, I'm sorry. But I'm sorry for you and all your struggles.
It's miserable, so I get it. I get it. Don't worry. So I introduced you. Vern Stenman.
And am I shooting for like a 1 o'clock draft?
Probably 105, 110 with questions.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you so much. My name is Vern Stenman. I'm the president of a group called Big Top Sports Entertainment. We own and operate the Madison Mallards, Forward Madison FC, and operate Green Stevens Field. Obviously Sam was here a couple of weeks ago, talking about the Mallards. And, we love Sam. She's been with us a little bit over a year now, and she's doing an outstanding job as the first female GM in the history of the Mallards. So I won't talk a whole lot about the Mallards today. I'll focus more on Green Stevens Field and our operations there. Quick story. When I first came to Madison to interview for the job that I eventually took with Steve Schmidt, who owns the Madison Mallards. He and I and another guy are business partners that own and operate the overall group now. Anyway, I was coming to town to see a friend and to get to know Madison and pursue this job here in 2001. And I came in on East Washington. And I didn't know Madison. The internet wasn't nearly as developed with pictures of all the stadiums and things like that, like it is today, of course. And I had no idea what I was looking for. I didn't know where the ballpark was. It was January, I believe, all covered in snow. And I saw Green Stevens Field, and I'm like, wow, that's a really cool place. And I thought that was the home of the baseball team that I was, pursuing a job with. And a few hours later, I find out that no, there's this kind of old, neglected ballpark on the north side of Madison that is the home of the Mallards. And I hopped the fence and gave myself a tour of the stadium. At that point, I don't think I hurt anyone's feelings, but the curiosity about Bleeds never went away from me from that very first moment I was here in Madison in 2001, and so. But I learned more about the area too. A lot of you, I'm sure all of you remember, even recently 7 or 8 years ago, there was a homeless camp across the street from Breeze when we were negotiating our lease with the city of Madison for the facility. There's abandoned car lots. That's what that area was. I think one person that doesn't maybe get enough credit along the way is former Mayor Dave Cheslevich. Who I think around like 08, 09, slowly starts acquiring all the property around Green Stevens Field on behalf of the city for future development. And then Otto Gephardt, a prominent property developer here in Madison, was really the first significant developer to see value in that area and start pursuing really aggressive projects, probably around like 2014, 2015. And so we kind of kept our curiosity up about Breeze. We were always looking for new opportunities to build our business. And so, the city of Madison owns Warner Park where the Mallards play. They also own Green Stevens Field. And so we've always had a good working relationship with the city of Madison and the Parks Department, who specifically is kind of the landlord at Warner Park and that Breeze for us, basically. And we started inquiring and said, hey, what are you guys thinking about with Green Stevens Field? At that time, it had been basically completely ignored. There'd been a couple maintenance projects. They built a new press box. They repaired the grandstands in some areas. When I first came to Madison, they were close to condemning it. And fortunately, a group of community members led a charge to get it listed on the National Registry of Historic Places. And that's where it's sitting as a protected property today. And So like I said, we acquired with the city. What's going on with Breeze? They had hosted about 25 athletic events there in the year 2015. And they had just approved putting artificial turf in at Breeze. And it was, acknowledgement that they hadn't been utilizing the facility, partly because they couldn't keep the grass alive. A lot of you probably know, again, that area was a swamp 100 years ago, and it's very difficult to build in that area. It's very difficult to maintain grass and keep it up to the high level we need for athletics. And so the city starts seeing people like Otto building in that area. They say, man, maybe we should do more here and try to make this a more of an interesting destination. And the city decides to put out for bid the opportunity to manage Breeze Stevens Field. And we actually sat down with Otto at that time, Otto Gephardt, and said, hey, we're thinking about doing this thing in your backyard. You're the first kind of person here developing. And he said, you know what, guys, you're perfect, because I see this as Wrigleyville, to use the Chicago Cubs as a reference point. And I don't have the Cubs yet, and we need a Cubs, right? And we said, well, that's kind of what we do. Obviously, at that point, we had invested aggressively in Warner Park in partnership with the city of Madison, and things were going well for the Mallards. We had no real interest in moving the Mallards there. It wouldn't really fit. They built it too small for baseball, even though they played baseball there for almost 60 years. But we knew baseball wasn't going to be a fit there. And we were just starting to learn about soccer. Do we have any soccer fans in the room at all? A couple. Soccer at that time was going through a significant change in the US. There had been a few different professional leagues that were trying to compete to basically be the top professional soccer league in the US. One of them, of course, ends up winning, one loses. It creates a whole bunch of fallout in kind of the lower levels. We never intended to launch a top level, like Major League Soccer level club here in Madison. But all the divisions below it kind of shook out at that time in like 16, 17. There was a ton of change and a very unpredictable time as to, what kind of team would make sense to bring here to Madison. So we entered into a lease agreement with the city starting in 2016, and we started just doing concerts and events and trying to just kind of learn the facilities. It's quirky, it's weird, it's small, it's tight, it's difficult to manage in a lot of ways because of the space restrictions, and some of the historic stuff creates a few challenges, but nothing really significant. We think the history is much more positive and fun than it is a restriction for us. So we started doing concerts. We had Steve Miller Band, we had Toby Keith, we had all kinds of national touring acts come through. That was kind of the foundation of what we started there as a business. And then by 2018, there started to finally be enough clarity for what was happening in the lower divisions of professional soccer in the US. And so it was clear at that time there's going to be Major League Soccer, and that's going to be the teams like the Chicago Fire and Minnesota Uniteds of the world that are kind of playing at the top level in 20 to 30,000 seat stadiums in major markets across the country. And then there was a league called the USL. And the USL was operating at that time actually at the third division. So like I use baseball as a comparison to in Major League Baseball, you've got Major League Baseball, AAA, AA. The USL is kind of operating like at that AA level, kind of a couple of steps down from the top. And the league that was competing with Major League Soccer to kind of take that top spot ends up failing. And the USL steps in and says, we'll launch a second division league and a third division league. And we'll take the second division team to cities like Las Vegas and Sacramento and Nashville and launch teams there. Then we'll also have this team this league at the third division, and that turns out to be the right fit for us here with Madison. And so in 2018, we come to agreement with what comes to be named the USL League One, so operating at the third highest level of professional soccer in the US. Decided to launch a team that would start in 2019. We go through probably about $4 to $5 million of improvements in partnership with the city to build a new concession stand. It's kind of located on the west end of the stadium here, built into the historic grandstand behind home plate, or behind what used to be home plate years ago. And we launched the team, and it went really well. It was great. It was so much fun. for those of you that don't know a lot about soccer, as a marketer, I love the idea of cults, and cults I look at in a very positive way. I look at cults as a group of people that are passionate about something. It could be Star Wars, it could be books, it could be card games, it could be whatever, and we want to tap into those things and that group, those groups of people that care deeply about something. And soccer is literally an international cult. That's what soccer is, and it's super cool. And I'm not a soccer guy. I'm learning soccer. I'm learning to love soccer. But primarily through Twitter, international soccer all over the world is connected, and they talk to each other and they follow teams in other countries, in other cities at different levels. People will have their favorite Premier League team in England. They'll have their favorite La Liga team in Spain, their favorite American team here. They'll have a lower division team that they love and they follow. And what that means as a marketer is if you do your job right and you have an interesting story to tell, that you can literally go from this little tiny club in Madison, Wisconsin, and create something that connects with people throughout the world. And that sounds like a lot, right? But in a weird way, soccer creates this environment that if you do it right, it's actually kind of easy to tap in to that group. And so the first thing we wanted to tackle was the branding for the team. And understanding a little bit about that kind of international, potential that soccer had, we understood that we had to have a really interesting local story with the naming and the branding of the club. And so we did a name the team contest, and the two most popular submittals far and away were Forward, something to do with forward, because of the alliteration with or not alliteration, that's not the right term, but the position in soccer, being a forward, but also the state motto, of course, for the state of Wisconsin. So people love that, but they also love the Flamingos. And I'm guessing most of you know the story back in the late 70s. Leon Varjan and his group of folks putting 1,008 plastic pink flamingos on Bascom Hill. In the mid 2000s, I think the city council actually made the plastic pink flamingo the official city bird of the city of Madison. And so we had these two names. We had flamingos and we had forwards. And fortunately, in European soccer, it was very common to take a name that meant one thing and connect it with strangely, a lot of times a bird that meant a totally different thing. And if you study European soccer, you'll see that happen a lot. And we said, what if we're both? How can we do both of these things? So we land on Forward Madison FC, and we bring in the pink flamingo as our primary mark that you see up here. And we roll out in Madison, Wisconsin, that most of the world thinks is this tundra, right? With the plastic pink flamingo as our mark. And in a way, people might just think we're trying to take advantage of this thing, But then soccer fans, again, they're not just a cult. They're smart. They're really engaged. They want to know. They want to understand the story of what's going on, and they dig into the story. And they hear about this thing from the late 70s in Wisconsin, that there's really a connection in this Midwest town to plastic pink flamingos. And they're like, that's awesome. And then we rolled out our logo, and they said, man, that's really cool. It's kind of intended to be a little bit more of a piece of art, really, than it is your typical sports brand. We're the first, and I believe still the only men's professional sports team in the entire country, one of only a handful in the entire world that uses pink as their primary color. But again, you want a story that you can tell to that community that's different, right? That's different. And to be able to do that was a lot of fun. The next thing we did, we started rolling out our uniforms. And our in soccer, they call them kits. The uniforms turn out to be another kind of avenue of real potential to tell a story. And we started taking some risks with our uniforms early on. It's really crazy, kind of outlandish, bright, sometimes pink, sometimes blue. We have a Madison flag kind of looking kit as well that we normally use at home. And we pushed that out to the internet. And we invested again aggressively in making sure the designs were cool, the people telling the stories were cool, and the international community engaged and grabbed onto them. One of my favorite stories about Forward today is that there's a soccer uniform store, a kit store in London called Classic Football Shirts. It's hard to imagine, but it's like almost like St. Vinny's, like that kind of scale of racks and things like that. But it's all soccer uniforms, both used and new, from all over the world. They buy over 1,000 uniforms from us every single year and sell them in their store in London. It's staggering what's happened with this thing for us to have a real brick and mortar retail presence, moving significant numbers of our uniforms from our little team here in Madison in London. And that's kind of reflective of that connection that we made again with that international fan base for soccer. So 2019 was great. We had a lot of fun, a lot of cool things happened. Then the pandemic came. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about how terrible it was to be in the sports and entertainment business in 2020. It was not a lot of fun, but it made us stronger. We got through it, we navigated it, and we came out of it okay. We were still in business. 21, we returned to play in Madison, actually in the year 2020. One of the things that hopefully history erases, but was the fact that it wasn't actually legal to play baseball or soccer in Dane County in the year 2020. And so we moved our soccer team to Wauwatosa and played our season there. And then in 21, we returned, but we were under restrictions early in our season. 22, things kind of get back to normal. Some of the highlights for us in 22 were that we actually sold out. We had some of our best crowds in September of 2022. And I know I'm running up against my time here, so I'll summarize it quickly. But some of the coolest thing that happens for us last year were that we come into September, our team's terrible. And another part of our research, and how we want to run this team is that it turns out in soccer, our belief at least was coming into it that winning and losing was going to be a big deal. It was really going to drive revenue, drive tickets, drive the ability to make this team connect with our community, right? And of course, in 2021, we're bad. 2022, we turn out to be bad again. And it's coming into August. We're home like 4 Saturdays out of 6. We're up against the UW football team. You might have heard of them. And we're just panicked. Like there's no way anyone's coming to our games. We stink on the field, and we're up against the behemoth of UW football. And we had some of our best crowds in the history of the team. Sold out the stadium a couple times in that time period. So that was really encouraging for us. I talked about our uniforms. This is one of another pictures from last year that we're really proud of. We redesigned our home uniform for one night. Used the colors of the Ukrainian flag. And we raised about $45,000. We donated to UNICEF. That sold throughout the country, throughout the world. I think we sold that specific uniform to almost 20 different countries. Bought that uniform, and then we donated all the proceeds to UNICEF and to Ukraine. Really fun. So we work hard in the community. I'd be completely missing my job here if I didn't talk about the Flock. The Flock is our independent support organization. I don't know if I have a picture of them in here or not. I do not. But the Flock sits down here in the end. If you ever get to a game, they will stand the entire game. They'll be wearing garish, crazy looking pink outfits and all kinds of stuff. And they will stand and sing songs in support of the team the entire game. They are amazingly fun and entertaining, and really the kind of center of the entertainment and the fun of our games, and kind of sets the tone for the whole thing. And it's about 750 fans every night. We'll sit back there or stand, I suppose. And they are organized as a 501c3. They host fundraisers year round. They go out and engage in community events with our players. And they really take being a fan to a whole different level, where they've really become, for us, we really look at them almost more as partners, almost more as owners of the team. Even with our logo, we had 4 or 5 different directions we could have gone with the logo, and we literally sat down with the guys that founded the Flock that were just fans. and showed them the logos and asked them to tell us what they thought we should do. And we picked the logo that they told us to go with. And we actually had internal division on what to do from a branding perspective, but they said, no, do this. And what that did from a marketing perspective today, fast forward 5 years, is that those guys own it, and that's what you want as an operator of a sports team is your fans, your people around you, the community to take ownership in your team and in your brand. And that's really, a huge piece of the foundation of what we've done. So, as you can tell, I could probably go for another couple hours. So I will wrap up there though, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
What's the cost of a ticket?
It's a little bit more expensive. So Mallard's games are about $13, I think, is a entry level price for a ticket now. Forward's probably $19 or $20 for our cheapest seat. It is a professional team. Soccer, again, the good and the bad. There's always good and bad with these things, right? The international fan base, the ability to tap into that's awesome. We also tap in and compete internationally for players. And so we might lose a player to a second division team in Denmark because they're willing to pay more than we can pay a guy. And we found a niche, like we've got 3 guys on our roster this year that were on Premier League developmental teams. That we're not gonna maybe make it to the top tier of the Premier League. But we were able to bring them in here to Madison, and at least a couple of them look like they're gonna be pretty outstanding players. So it's a weird thing to be in that way, but that's what drives ticket prices up, is that the actual production of the games is crazy.
What's your season and how many home games?
We'll play 18 home matches. We started April 3rd, I think, this year. So normally early April until mid-October. So it's a long spread over the summer and into the early part of the fall.
The new suites that you put in
Yeah.
last year that you finished, in the fall, those are really nice.
That's this part here, I think you're referring to the Forward Club probably. I'll see if I can find that.
The grant on the white side.
This is the Forward Club.
So that, and it allowed, like the grandsons to stand on the field edge, and a lot of players came by after and the kids.
Yeah, we took an old room under the stands on Mifflin Street side. That was storage for almost 100 years. And we ripped out 2 old steel garage doors, put in glass, finished the inside. It's really a nice space. One of them is our office, and one is what we call the Forward Club. We hosted World Cup viewing parties in there. We'd have 150 people in there watching World Cup games throughout that time period. And it's a great spot for, we've hosted weddings in there. We've hosted corporate events, political fundraisers, and we do a really cool pre-game and post-game party, especially when we win. It's a really fun atmosphere. Our players will actually come and hang out in the club afterwards with our fans, and it's a pretty fun spot.
Secondly,
Yeah.
I know there's a service club that's working there in the stands.
Oh, sure.
You get a substantial amount of money actually for working there, so.
Yep.
Sign up, how do you determine what the take home is for a service club?
I don't know the specifics of that. I know that we do a couple different things, like we have some opportunities at soccer games. We also have some opportunities at concerts. If you're interested in it, I could have my staff connect with you and explain that to you. I don't know the specifics of it.
I think this would be, as a club, this would be a good fundraiser for us.
Would you be the person I could connect them with, or who would be the person that would be that? Yeah. I'll grab your contact information afterwards. Wow. Sounds like they might have got there. I bet it's a concert beer thing.
That's your beer kit.
Yep. And those are really good. Yes. We do it at Forward games as well, but I don't think people raise that kind of money. Unless you have some really good tippers. But yeah.
Have you noticed anything from the Ted Lasso?
I think all that stuff creates optimism in soccer in the US. I think that from a business perspective, we're looking at 10 years, 15 years, 20 years down the road. And we think that soccer is going to continue to grow. And something like Ted Lasso, something like Welcome to Wrexham and that whole story, seeing pop culture in America talk about soccer is something that I don't remember as a kid. Maybe the World Cup in '92 was probably the one time in my life prior to the last 5 years where soccer was really a part of pop culture in the US. And I think it is more now today than ever. And I think that I'm a fan of both of those shows and what they do. I think that I've heard that the negative of the Ted Lasso thing is that there's actually a handful of soccer managers that are from the US. Actually, one is from Kenosha by the name of Jesse Marsh, who coached in the Premier League, and he struggled this year and he got fired. And everybody calls him Ted Lasso, you know, like nobody takes him seriously. And there's people that are in that really specific niche of like the 5 to 10 Americans that think they can manage in the Premier League someday. I think they might see more negative to it than positive, but I think that's a very small group, and I'm not in that group, so I think it's pretty great.
About parking.
Yeah.
Where's parking?
So parking's gotten really pretty good. In the last few years, the city again has been really smart in how they've allowed development around the area. And I can't get to the right slide, of course, but the weird thing about parking at Breeze is that most of it is over here. And so it happens, especially on concert nights, people will come in on East Washington, and they want to turn towards the stadium. And there's some parking in this building, there's some parking in this building, there's some on-street parking over there. But right here, or right over there behind American Family, there's a parking garage called the Livingston Garage that the city built about 3 years ago now. And it's 600 cars. It has never been full for one Forward Madison game in our history. It's a block and a half from the stadium. So the challenge we're trying to deal with right now is how to get people on this side of the street. We're actually working with the city right now to push people that way with signage and things like that. But especially concerts. We have some really great concerts coming this year. Doobie Brothers, Weezer, Garbage, a lot of good stuff coming. But on the concert nights, especially people that haven't been to Breeze before, the stadium's kind of a magnet, right? And they all want to go right next to it, and the parking is kind of not where you'd expect it. But we have over 2,500 parking spots within 3 blocks, I think, of the stadium. But they're just not where you would expect them to be. Yeah.
Just curious. Is this a leasing situation with the city?
In what way?
City property? Like-
Yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty common across the country.
Yeah.
So most sports teams, I would say 98% of sports teams, from major league teams all the way down to teams like ours, their facilities are owned by a municipality, and then the team leases it back from them. So I would say it's common. I don't know that there's a lot of comparables in Madison specifically for this type of thing. Right off the top of my head, but it's pretty common for them.
Actually, maybe for high school soccer, as it was first time,
Yeah.
the city had their head in that place. They would have lost the state soccer tournament, which brings a fair amount of money to now. Milwaukee.
Yeah.
We just didn't figure out ahead of time, the improvements. It's an incredible venue now, and like I say, high school soccer really benefits from it.
It's great.
Many-
Great. Yeah. Anybody else? Well, thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you. Thanks for your time, Dan. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Thanks to Vern. Vern, we do make a contribution to Polio Plus Fund in your honor, as for all our speakers. Next week, Joe Ballas will be speaking on the Madison Community Policing Foundation. So, all right. Everybody have a good Rotary week. Take care. Oh.